Hey team, how's it going? In today's video, we're going to be breaking down a pretty overpowered build that's popped up recently, and that is the full tank build on Jayce. It's been seen in the LPL and a bunch in solo queue, and I've tested it quite a lot myself, and I would say without a doubt it's his strongest build at the moment, so we're going to be breaking down the runes, the items, and a few examples from games of mine in the laning phase and team fights, and just break down exactly how this build is so strong on this champion, and when you should be running it in solo queue. So if you're interested to see why is it so strong, or if you want to try it yourself, then let's get started. How's it going, everyone? Real quick before we start the video, I'm excited to announce that I've teamed up with the Broken Bike Concert Boys, and I'm going to be running coaching classes 5 days a week in the Top Lane Academy. They've really built such a great community of passionate students trying their best to improve, so if you're keen to improve alongside them and be coached by me personally, the link will be in the description. I'd love to see you there, and I hope you enjoy the video. Starting things off with the runes, and a big part about why this build feels so good, even in lane before you start building and completing your tank items, is definitely the Grasp of the Undying page helps you in so many matchups that Jayce historically struggles with. So if you've ever blind picked Jayce before, you've probably versed champs like Malphite, champs like Gragas, even a tank like Sile that just poke you down, and you don't really have any sustain to deal with it. But with the Grasp page, Grasp combined with Second Wind and Overgrowth, you can definitely keep up and sustain, especially when you're building into items like Unending Despair, building a lot of early HP. These matchups become a lot easier for you. So in this page, you're going to be running Demolish, Chicken Win, and Overgrowth almost every single game, and you can be running Bone Plating into champs that can't proc it very easily until they're committing, like a Jax or a Riven. And for secondary runes, I'll just go Jack of all trades and cookies every game. I'll say Jack of all trades is mandatory, because without it, your damage is very low. All of your damage, if you think about it, is coming from Doran's Blade and Jack of all trades, and you definitely feel a lot weaker if you don't take it. Cookies, I guess it could be optional if you wanted to go free boots. I'd never do that, just because cookies are pretty powerful in volatile matchups when you use them when you're low HP, even though they don't give mana anymore. They're really good in volatile lanes, and you want to be dominating lane on this champion. Of course, that doesn't change even on the tank build. And then double adaptive, flat HP, or scaling HP into easy matchups like a Nessus or a Dr. Mundo. And if you're ever unsure what to do, just run the page I've got here on the screen, and it's going to work in the majority of your lanes. Moving on to the build, and as for your starting item, you are going to be going Doran's Blade every game. That doesn't change, especially with Jack of all trades. You want to get those 3 stacks straight away, but for your first item, still going to be Tear, but then building into Unending Despair. So you can go Chain Vest into heavier AD games, so maybe they have Cleared Top, a Graves Jungle, Chain Vest would be great, but a lot of the time I found Kindle Gem is a bit nicer, as having a lot of more upfront HP early game can be quite nice, especially Ability Haste gives you a bit more combat power, but again, Chain Vest into heavy AD top jungle can be really good also. Now, if you're versus an AP lane, you want to be going Spectre's Cowl first. This will give you 2 extra stacks of Jack of all trades, and you definitely need it to get 10 out of 10 most of the time. So don't be afraid to go Spectre's Cowl into AP lanes like a Gragas, a Malphite, a Rumble. It feels very good, but just make sure you don't upgrade the item. Stay on the Cowl, and then build into your Unending Despair, because you don't want to get a Spirit Visage so early in the game before you're getting the healing and shielding from your Fimbulwinter and Unending Despair. Now, boots is going to be Tabbies or Merc Treads. We all know when to build them. I would prioritize Merc Treads, however, because you get another stack of Jack of all trades from the Tenacity, and also having Tenacity on this champion feels really good because you're going to be getting stuck in and using melee form way more than you're used to doing on the damage build. But you can go Swifties if you're versus a heavy slowing top, like an Olaf or a Nasus, or if you just base with enough gold for it. If you base on 1k gold after you finish your Despair, for example, it can be great to just grab Swifties in one go. Now, Unending Despair. Unending Despair into Fimbulwinter is the core of the build. This is when you're going to be at your absolute strongest. At this 2-item spike, you're pretty much unkillable, and you do so much damage there early in the game. But you can go Eclipse first item. I'm not a big fan of it. I prefer the straight tank most of the time. But if you're really far ahead, or if you're into maybe an AP or a range top like a Teemo, something like that, and you don't want to go Spectre's Cowl, you can just go Eclipse Rush into Fimbulwinter. Still relatively tanky build, but in my experience, going Spectre's Cowl into AP, and then going Despair and Fimbulwinter is going to be the way to go. So moving on to our final items, Spirit Visage as your third item is going to be the play most of the time. So you can see Despair into Fimble into Visage. That is going to be the best combination of 3 items that you're going to go most of the time, as Visage will amplify all that healing. But if they don't really have that much magic damage and you don't want Visage, or if you want a bit more damage, you can go Sundered Sky and then get the Visage later on, which will also amplify the Sundered Sky healing, which can feel quite good. Or you can go Serpent's Fang if they have a lot of shielding, like an Ivern and a Janna, champs like that. Or maybe they have a lot of Eclipse champs, you can go Serpent's Fang as well, especially if you're far ahead. If you get a hidden lane, which you should do on Jayce most of the time, you're already going to be unkillable at 2 items, so going a Serpent's Fang or a Sundered Sky is not going to feel that bad at all. But if they do have a lot of magic damage, definitely go onto Spirit Visage, even if you are far ahead. But again, if they don't have much magic damage, you can go another armor item. So Randuins, if they have a lot of crit champs, maybe they have a Quinn top that's building crit, or a Yasuo or a Yone and a normal AD carry, you can go Randuins or Thornmail if they have a lot of healing, champs like Warwick or something along those lines. But for your 4th or 5th item, I would recommend going Juxo the Protein, especially if you already have Visage and Unending Despair. This will be a great item for you to pick up, but the other items can be built in the same place just as a 4th or 5th item. And we have a full build example down below. The most important thing you need to keep in mind is the first 3 items. Despair, Fimbulwinter, Visage is going to be the core of this build. That's what you're going to build in over 90% of the games. So that into Juxo the Protein, you're going to be good, and then you can just build whatever you need in the game. Moving on to the laning phase, and I have an example here from a recent solo queue game of mine, up against a Comet Silence, so definitely a lot of poke. I was very happy for the extra sustain from this rune page up against this champ. The early lane's not that much different, to be honest, except for having Grasp, so you do have a lot of extra combat power, so I'm going to be breaking down how I used it in this game. So we can see I was really worried about Sion queuing me from the bush, which is why I'm sitting down here, but now he started W, as he saw I wasn't falling for the cheese, so I'm looking to stack my Grasp and then Q onto him, melee form Q, getting a melee form grass proc as well, and able to win the first trade. So it's important to note you don't have to swap into melee form to get a melee form grass proc. You can shoot him in range form, and then swap into hammer form, and you'll get the extra flat HP, and get the extra damage and healing from a melee form grass proc as well, even though you don't have to go near them. But there he just wasted his W, well not wasted it, he used his W on the wave, so I had an opportunity to just hammer form onto him. So looking to stand here, get level 2 first, and you can see I go in, get the 3 melee auto attacks, dodges E here, so you can see I'm not afraid to make it a lot more messier, especially with the extra sustain this page will give me. So making it more volatile than I normally would on a damage Jayce page. To be honest, with Conqueror I would have gone in there anyway, but you can see my health is a lot higher than if I did have a Conqueror page. So here, I'm going to be looking to punish him if he walks up. That's why I swap into Hammer Form here, not just to get mana back from hitting the wave, but if you walk up and touch these minions, I'm going to go, and that's exactly what I did here. So Q onto him, look to just beat them down. So if he's slowed from the melee Q, unlucky Kate there, if he's slowed from the melee Q, makes it very easy to get your W and your Q onto him. And now I'm going to be looking to dive. So you see how strong this champion can be in the early lane, especially with Grass Page, makes you even stronger than you normally are. So if you are looking to try it out, make sure you're really pushing your limits in the early game. Now, to make this as productive as possible, I'm not going to break down entire laning phases. I just want to showcase and highlight the differences that this build will give you when you play Jayce, so you know how different you should be playing if you are going to look to do the tank build. And the main difference really covers up a big weakness of Jayce, and that is just how squishy and vulnerable to ganks you are on this champion. But with this build, it completely changes how aggressive you're allowed to play. And you'll see very shortly, even though I'm playing the trades well, you don't want to take damage for no reason, of course, even if you're tankier. But you'll see very shortly, I do die to a gank, but it completely changes how aggressive I can play. So I made a big mistake here. It's something that you can learn from as well. You should never play aggressive in range form, almost never, when you just switch to it. You need your melee form cooldown off before you do this, because if I had my melee form up, of course I could just switch to hammer form, knock him away, and I'm completely fine, but I have to tank a fully charged Q, which is completely not okay. But you can see here, if I was the normal damage Jayce build, I'm just dead right now. But with Unending Despair, you can see how long I can fight for, constantly getting that healing. I'm taking very little damage from these two champions, and I'm just cutting them out here. I do die in the end, a little bit unfortunate. If only I had flash up, or if I played the trade a little bit better. But you can just see how much more aggressive you're allowed to play on this champion compared to if you had the full damage build. It's also really good at blowing up towers and looking for demolish procs compared to normal Jayce. Of course, you almost never take demolish with Eclipse, and your sustain is so low that proccing the hitting the tower and taking damage isn't really worth it that much on the damage build. But with the tank build, you can look to chip away the tower, blow it up. You can see in this game it's down to 2 plates already, and it's really a lot harder for you to die to ganks as long as you've got good vision down and you're playing accordingly. And for our final laning example, I'm playing up against a Malphite, so Jayce's #1 most common counter pig if you leave it open, but you can see how much different it's going to be very shortly with this build. So little tip coming up here, if you do play up against a Malphite, when you hammer form onto him, you want to Q to dodge his comet, like I did here. So when he Qs you, you hammer Q to dodge the comet, and then you want to E him away instantly. Don't greed that little auto, even though you would greed the auto in most matchups. You just want to E straight away so that he can't get his EW onto or minimize the time that he has to use it. So just looking to take trades down, but you're going to see how little damage I'm going to take purely because I have Spectre's Cowl and the extra regen from that item as well. So I'm going up here just trying to blow up the tower in front of him, even though he's not really that behind at this point. You can see how much extra damage you do with Demolish to the tower, and then just poking him and proccing my Grasp whenever I can. So the Q damage, very little, you can see, with the extra MR from Spectre's Cow. And Jayce would normally win this matchup anyway, in the early game, the 1 to 4, 1 to 5, but later on is when it got really tricky. But with Spectre's Cow, it doesn't really feel as difficult as it did in the past. So you'll see here, gonna go look to Pokemon to tower, chip away at the tower yet again. That's my main goal in these tank matchups. So EM away before he can get his EW, you can see very common for me. Not greeding to get a little bit of extra damage myself, trying to disengage the damage away from him. So just queuing him, just full sending a trade now, pushing the limits of this champ a little bit. And I was really confident because I'd cookie him. You can see how that's why I'm a big fan of taking cookies every game on this page and not greeting for free boots. But you'll see here, normally if you're playing Eclipse Jayce, you cannot walk up and hit this tower. Well, at this point, you'd have maybe pickaxe longsword, something like that. But you can't walk up and hit this. But you can see how little damage he does in this game. Because I have the Spectre's Cow, I'm able to easily kill him. And then just keep breaking this tower. So it makes even these tricky matchups like Malphite or Gragas a lot more easy. And you spike a lot harder 1 to 2 items. So definitely a build I recommend you trying if you love playing this champion. Moving on to team fighting. Now, with the normal Jayce build, team fighting is one of the hardest skills to learn on him, as you do so much damage, but you're such an immobile, squishy champion that it's hard to know when to go in. But with the tank build, that all goes away. You want to be utilizing hammer form as much as you can. So you need to see here straight away, I'm engaging onto the Jinx. There's also a big benefit of this build. People just don't expect it. When they see a Jayce, they don't expect them to just fly on in, as he would get one shot in most cases. But here I can just engage with my hammer Q, tank the tower, it doesn't really matter, and just really force onto them. So flashing in, playing really aggressive here. You can see it's really hard for them to kill me. I'll skip it a little bit. Don't want to waste time hitting the Scion. And big demolish proc there. You can see I'm not afraid to be the front line and engage, which is going to be a big habit that you need to break if you are a Jayce player. But now you can see just running through 3 people, not afraid of that damage whatsoever. So when you have this build, when you do spike at that 1 to 2 item mark, you do need to play different. You're more of a front line. Don't be afraid to go in and die. When normally Jayce should be a low def champ, so respecting ganks early, playing at the backline of a team fight. But with this build, don't be afraid to get messy, die a couple times, get stuck in, and really learn the limitations, because you just can't play it like you're a normal Jayce, as your range form is really weak with this build, but it makes your hammer form so much stronger. So I'm going to showcase one more example of this, really not being afraid to get stuck in and the limits of this champ, where in this game, my teammates just got caught out around Baron. That's what you really love to see, and Twitch is not listening to pings. He's not too happy with the teammates here. But I'm going to be looking in, and normally, if you're playing damage Jayce, you'd shoot a Shock Blast here, wait for the next cooldown, give the Baron, and try to pick up kills with QEs, and maybe flash in later on when your team joins in. Waiting for Lulu, waiting for Lissandra, stuff like that. But on this build, you can see I'm still going to shoot a Shock Blast, a little bit of damage, better than nothing, but now I'm going to be going in. So flash onto the Cogmore, he does flash it, so great flash by him, and now I'm stuck in the middle of 4 people, but you can see it's not really an issue. So dodge the Cogmore ulti with Hammer Q, and they can't really kill me. My champion is just too strong with this build, and eventually they would have been able to, but you can, if Lulu didn't show up. But you can see I can buy a lot of time and make a lot of space. You have to play more like a Renekton if you play this Jayce build. So kind of weaving in and out, getting stuck in, not being afraid to engage, compared to if you were playing Jayce like you do on champs like Jayce, champs like GP. You have to play more like a Renekton, getting stuck in and making space, and get used to the limitations of this build. Because before going into it, this was one of my early games doing this build. I didn't know if I could survive that or not. I was pretty sure I could have, which is why I went for it. But you really need to learn the limitations of it, and there's no better way than trial and error. So if you feel like you can win a play and start a fight and get stuck in, don't be afraid to figure it out like this, because you live for a lot longer than you'd think so on this champion. Moving on to when and why is it good, just to give you a better understanding of why all of a sudden this champion that's been building Glass Cannon for 10 years or so is now building Full Tank as his strongest build. And part of it is definitely that the Drain Tank items are strong at the moment, so Unending Despair, Fimble, into Visage, all kind of Drain Tank long sustain items, are quite overpowered, which is why champs like Maokai, who are historically really bad in solo queue, are really strong, and champs like Cassandra that can build it, and champs like Volibear, their stocks have definitely increased. And also Jayce's main build, so Eclipse, if you remember in the past, it gave lethality, it gave Omnivamp, all these really good stats on Jayce, and now it's been nerfed so many times, it's not really that great of an item on him anymore. It's not a bad item, but definitely not as good as the drain tanking items. Now this build also covers up the champion's main weaknesses, so his 2 main weaknesses is definitely that he's really weak to dive. So if you were to play Jayce competitive from experience, champions that you hate to see, even if you're in a great matchup, maybe they blind pick Nah, and normally you'd love to see Jayce, but they have a Jarvan or a Nocturne or hard engaged champs everywhere else, like a Kai'Sa Nautilus. It can make it really hard for you to pick Jayce top in that game. Jayce mid not so much, the lane's so short, but it's really hard to play Jayce top into those types of champs because if you have a non-side laning champion mid like an Orianna, you still have to be on the weak side of the map, really easy for you to die, but on this build, it's really difficult for them to kill you inside as long as you're not too overextended and trolling. So it covers up a lot of his weaknesses in the mid game, and it makes your team fighting a lot more easier. The ease of execution is definitely there in that build as well. So champs like Malphite and lane as well. Champs like Malphite, Gragas, historically really hard matchups for you, become a lot easier with this build. As you saw from that example, the Spectre Scout completely changes everything, and the extra sustain from Grasp, Second Wind, and Overgrowth makes it a lot easier to get through the lane as well, or even win the lane. Not just get through it, definitely you can win the lane and look to blow up plates even in these hard tank counter picks. And as for the when you should be building it, so when you should build full tank or the full damage build, I'd say because the tank build is a little bit overtuned at the moment, and Jayce's normal build's a little bit weak, you can just build this every single game. In fact, I do recommend building it every game. It is the best at the moment, but the times when it's better to build the full damage build is going to be in games where they're not really going to be diving into, so they have a really strong backline, especially enchanters. So if they have Jinx Janna, Jinx Lulu, Kog'Maw, maybe a Hui mid, or jungle champs that aren't going to be really running into like a Kindred, that can be a great time to just do the normal damage build, or going Eclipse into a bit of tank like Fimbulwinter. That can be the good time to do that. But most of the time, especially if you're versing a lot of dives, so like a Kai'Sa Leona bottom, or an assassin like a Kha'Zix jungle, or even just normal hard engaged Jarvan, Nocturne, champs like that. The tank build's going to be the way to go, especially if in lane you're versing a hard engaged champ like a Gragas or a Malphite. You need that Spectre Scout, you need that grass page for the lane. So most of the time, you'll find yourself in games where you do want to just be building tank, but into really strong backline, front to back, enchanter type comps, you can look to still build the damage build. Alright everyone, that's it for now. Hope you all had a great Christmas and a new year. It's great to be back pumping out content. So if there's anything you'd like to see me cover, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. I'll get straight to work and I'll see you all next time.